Okay, good morning and welcome to a very special last lecture. I'm going to call it a lecture on this book, The Real Me. We are finishing this book, The Real Me. As I mentioned in the last shir and last lecture, that I am missing chapters 35 and 36. Um, Someone borrowed my book and the pages fell out, so I don't have 35 and 36. If one day I do get my hands on this book again, maybe I'll just make two shiurim, two lectures, 35, chapter 35, chapter 36. So I'm going to do the outro of this book, which is basically an addendum that the author adds, which I do have most of, and he titles it Connecting to Your Learning. He says that at the end of the day, it seems to be the most important thing, a summary. I would say basically the author is summarizing what he's saying in this book, and I'm going to explain a little more how I feel that it's a summary of the content of this book. It's called Connected to Your Learning. He talks about, we learn Torah. Again, this book is made for the Haredi audience who spend most of the days learning Torah. But how do we connect to that Torah, right? Like he says, you have a piece of schnitzel over here. Yeah, schnitzel is a very common food here in Israel. Basically, you take chicken breast and you put some breadcrumbs on it, fry it. People love it in Israel. Schnitzel, chicken cutlets, maybe you'd say in America. What bracha do you make on it? Gemara says that if you have anything with even a little mazonos in it, you make a mazonos. Is it the same? Most poskim don't say that. Most poskim actually say the halacha is that you'd say a shahakal on it because the breadcrumbs are really not distinct. They're on the outside of the chicken. You're eating it for the chicken, not for the breadcrumb. They give a little taste, but it's not a mixture. It's not a mixture. So therefore, he doesn't talk about the halacha over here, but he's saying a person is learning in the Mir yeshiva, and they have schnitzel, I think, every Wednesday or something like that. So he's learning all about the sugya and brachos, so learning Masechtas brachos, and then he comes to lunch and they're serving schnitzel, and he says, "Gosh, I learned about this today. What bracha do you make?" I don't even know what bracha to make, so he's not sure. So he skips lunch and he goes and cries in the side room. No, that's not what he does. He tries to call his rabbi. Most people would just make whatever bracha they feel like, even if you learn in the Mir. That's just the way the world is. It tastes too good. You don't have time to call a rabbi. Oh, I got the schnitzel on my plate. I'm really hungry. Dial a rabbi. What if the rabbi's not available? You go hungry. So, but he says that's the point. The point is that we have to connect our learning. You spend the whole day learning the sugya and brachos about when you have a mixture that has a little bit of mazonos in it, and you don't know what bracha making your schnitzel. You got to ask a rabbi right away. I remember there's a story. I was once sitting in a sukkah, in Shar Yashuv in America. I was maybe 20, in my late 20s or whatever, and they had breakfast. They were serving breakfast over there in the sukkah, and I was eating some cornflakes or something like that. And there's different brachos by cornflakes because it depends if it's milled corn or if it's corn flour. I couldn't ascertain whether it was milled corn or corn flour. You make a hadama if it's milled corn, or corn flour, which is basically ground up. It doesn't resemble corn anymore. So you make a shahakal. So I didn't know. I remember I didn't know which bracha to make. And it was just after the Yom Noraim, Sukkot. So I actually got up and I left. I left my bowl of cereal there. Because I really take my learning, I'm going to talk about this more in a second. I take my learning to heart and I make it lamaisa. You have to talk about making it lamaisa, taking it into your real life, connecting to your learning. He gives another example. He says there was a story of the Chazon Ish. It is told that the Chazon Ish once came to a Gemara class in a cheder to test him on Perek Elam Metzios. Elam Metzios is the second Perek in Bava Metzia. A lot of kids learn this. The first thing that Gemara they learn. He asked all the kids, "Who knows Perek Elam Metzios?" All the hands shut up. Right? He was testing them. They learned it very well. The Chazon Ish smiled and said, "You all forgot a Beferish Gemara. You forgot an explicit Gemara. It says in the middle of this Perek in Bava Metzia, one of the things that is proper for Talmud Chacham to lie about is B'Mesechas. You're not supposed to lie, but if someone asks you if you know a Masechta, you're allowed to lie. If he asks if he knows a certain Gemara, he may lie and say he doesn't, out of humility. So you obviously don't, right? Who knows the Metzias? The answer is, don't raise your hand. You don't know. You're supposed to lie. I mean, you don't have to lie. You don't just raise your hand. But he was saying that you learned El Metzias all about the halachas of returning lost objects. But one of the Gemaras over there says you have to be humble over there and not tell people that you know. Even if you actually do know something, you should be humble about it. So he was explaining to them they hadn't connected to their learning. So that's how really he ends off the book over here. He says, this type of learning, a connection to the message within the words that seek to absorb things that have content and are not just a bundle of statements. This is living what is being learned. It connects the internal personality of the person. It grows with him and energizes him. In this fashion, the learner will find his personal portion in the Torah and his chidushim, new ideas and interpretations. He will find interest in his learning and easily retain it. Many have learned this way and have succeeded. Those are the final words of the book. Many have learned this way and have succeeded. Because, again, this book is geared for people who are learning most of their day, learning Torah most of their day. So it's very important for you to take your learning and apply it to your life. Because people are not learning Torah most of the day. So they have a safek and halacha. They didn't learn this, right? I once had a conversation with my father, about something came up, a shaila came up, and I didn't learn the halacha about it. My father said, what do you do when you don't know the halacha? Well, you didn't learn about it. I said, you got to be machmir. And the answer is, well, now, after thinking about it, is that no, you got to be makel. If you don't know, God doesn't expect you to learn the whole Mishnah Berurah overnight, right? When a person's 16, 18 years old, he becomes aware of what he's doing. There's an enormous amount of halacha out there, and just from talk with your friends or other people, you realize a lot of things are shilas, they're questions. You can't always ask a question on the spot. So if you don't know the halacha, you can't just stop your life. I remember one time, it was during Sukkot, and I was becoming more firm and trying to learn as much Mishnah Berurah as I could. We were having Sukkot. I think I mentioned this story, and we had this fake grass on our porch where the sukkah was, and it rained the previous night. And there's a halacha about schita. You're not supposed to squeeze water out of surfaces. So I was not sure if I can go into the sukkah because it was Yom Tov, and I was extracting the water from the grass, this fake grass. So I didn't know what to do, and I spent the whole afternoon looking at Mishnah Berurah trying to find the answer. I couldn't even find the answer. It was a very stressful Yom Tov for me, to say the least. And it really upset me, and that's the decision I made, is that you got to be machmir. If you don't know the halacha, you got to be machmir. I after much thought, after going through halachas, and after going through a little bit of life, I say, no, Hashem doesn't expect you to know everything. He doesn't expect you to be able to ask your rabbi right on the spot, like the Schnitzel case. I don't think you have to ask the rabbi right away, and it's okay to just make a bracha. But if you're learning Mizachas Brachos, and you don't know the halacha, make sure to find out the halacha afterwards. And that's the point. The point he's really saying at the end, which I agree with wholeheartedly, and not just by learning, I'm going to explain in a second, is that you have to take everything from your head and apply it to your body, because most of the Torah is intellectual. That's what it is, intellectual. But the mitzvos, the kiyum of the Torah, is with your body. And when you don't have a connection between your head, what you're learning, and your body, right? And so the Pirkei Avos talks about halom enamas lishmar velasos. The ultimate purpose of learning is to mekayim the Torah, to do the Torah, and that's with your body. All the mitzvahs involve your body, not your head necessarily. The mitzvah of limud Torah involves your head, but your body is what does most of the mitzvahs through your body, and you have to be very vigilant to apply it right away. And even if you're not learning about that, if you come across a shaila, you know it's a shaila, okay, so maybe you can be makel in the present moment. But when you get a chance to speak to your rabbi and you have a list of questions, I used to do this all the time. I used to make lists of questions. I used to have sessions with my Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Yaakov Friedman, for an hour on the phone. I would literally go through, 20, 30 halachic questions, also, and ask him about different hashkafa and things like that. I just have a list. I'd write down a list. If I didn't know a question, that was part of the cheshbon nefesh I did, right? If I was unsure, I reviewed what I did the previous day, and I was unsure about a particular halacha or about a particular decision, I'd make sure to write it down, and when I got a chance to talk to Rosh Yeshiva, he wasn't always available. He's a very busy person. I asked him as many questions as I could and got the correct answer. I remember myself, checking off, on the questions, yes or no, whether I was allowed to do it or not, or what should I have done. So this is a very important part of your learning. And I think you can extrapolate this not just to learning, because I've mentioned many times that the Pirkei Avos says, right, derech eretz kadmol, the Torah, main derech eretz, and Torah derech eretz. Derech eretz is knowledge about the world. Am haaretz is not such a terrible thing. It's someone who doesn't know so much Torah, but he's very involved with the world. Basically, Google and Wikipedia are also very important, just as important as the Torah, because I'm going to explain going forward. I explain a lot of times in my shiurim that you can't understand the Gemara, the real truth in the Gemara, without understanding a great knowledge and understanding of the world. You have to know You have to know about different countries. You have to know about different foods, different things in the world, different people in the world, history of the world. You got to know all these things. That's Amaris. Not all these things are taught in regular education. For example, I find it's very strange in schools when I was growing up. They teach me all 50 capitals of the states in the United States, but I didn't learn anything about the capitals of the 195 countries in the world. And that's much more important to know about the 195 capitals of the world than the 50 capitals of the states. Usually, the capitals of the states of America, for some odd reason, are not the most important city in that state. A lot of times, like New York is Albany. I mean, so the country, the capitals, flags, different countries, very important. These things are not taught in school. They don't teach you about baseball players, about basketball players, about movie stars. They don't teach you about different types of foods, different recipes. These are the things that should be taught in school. Practical knowledge, not knowledge that's, ancient knowledge that's not relatable to today. They should teach you about technology, how to use technology. These things are so important. They should be taught in the schools. But if you're not taught them in schools, at least you Google them. And I always do this also. For the last 4 or 5 years, basically I spent 20 years learning Torah and exclusively learning Torah, like most people who this book is catered to. And I found myself at a crossroads because I realized, as I mentioned before, there was a turning point in my life where I said, you know what, materialism is really important in this world. You got to enjoy this world. And that's what God made the world for. And that's what Olam Haba is based on. To the degree that you're able to enjoy this world, you'll get Olam Haba, because Olam Haba is a physical reward. Our bodies, and whatever our bodies enjoy here, that we'll enjoy more in Olam Haba. That's what all the Rishonim, what most major commentaries, earlier commentaries, later commentaries in the Torah basically say the same thing. So I realized it was very important to know about these things, and I had very little knowledge. What do? You Google it. Whenever I came across a Mishpacha magazine, I came across a phrase I didn't know, a country I didn't know, a person I'd never heard of. I Googled it, read about Wikipedia. You read a little bit about, the roots of the person, their heritage, are they Jewish, not Jewish, and where the country they're from. And then you go to their personal life. That's the most interesting, right? You go to their personal life on Wikipedia. You don't read the whole thing about their career, the boring stuff, how many Emmys they won. We don't care about that. But, you read their personal life, that's interesting stuff, what their religious beliefs are, how many wives they had, and how many divorces they had. Those are interesting things. How many controversies do they have? Those are the stuff people talk about. So you got to know what people talk about, and you got to know these different things. So, or whenever I came in conversation at a Shabbos table, that's something I didn't know about. Right after Shabbos, I Google it or do Wikipedia. After doing that for, I'd say four years now, it's been like, I'm just based on that alone. People don't do that. It's something I carried over because I did when I was learning the Torah. I carried over to practical halacha. So therefore, when I was able to carry this method over to the practical world also. When I heard about something that I didn't recognize, I didn't understand, I was 20 years detached from the world. I was in a closet for 20 years, isolated in a shtetl learning Torah and not focusing on the world. Unfortunately, a lot of Haredi people never ever venture into the world, because they ban technology, they ban the internet. You can never even access the world anymore. It's very sad because you don't have Derech Eretz. You're missing part of Pirkei Avos. Even Derech Eretz in Torah. You can't understand the Torah Derech Eretz. It's so important. And I was able to carry that over and apply it to the point now to today. I think I'm more familiar with the world, the practical world, the important, the street smarts of the world than 99% of the people in the world, because I have such a strong basis in Torah, I'm able to connect it to it. I'm starting to see the fruits of that connection. So again, also when it comes to practical knowledge in the world, you got to take what you hear and what you talk about. You got to take it to Wikipedia and flesh it out, and then interject in your conversations where you talk about these things and reflect on them. So it's always, you hear about something, you got to make it lamaisa, you got to make it practical. There was one of the main products on Shark Tank that was successful. It's called Scrub Daddy. I also said about that, and besides just looking it up on Wikipedia and Google, I said, well, I got to get my hands on this Scrub Daddy. It looked like a regular sponge. It had a happy face on it. So I made an order on Amazon. I got all their products: Scrub Daddy, Scrub Mommy, Scrub Baby, Scrub Eraser. I ordered all of them. It was like $50. I got all of them. Are they good? They're okay. I mean, I just wanted, it's for a point of conversation. I wanted to have those in my hands. I bought these. I tested them, what they're like. They have cute little faces, smiley face. So I like to make things practical. I like to try different wines, different cheese wine combinations. We'll talk more about that going forward. But I like to make things practical. If I learn about a specific food, I want to go to the store and actually buy that food and taste it and see what it tastes like. There's so many different types of cheeses, so many different types of wines. You got to know about this stuff because it helps you enjoy the world. And then when you connect to the Torah will tell you which wines and which cheeses and which foods make good food, because food is meant to taste good and enjoy it, and that brings you Olam Haba. So at the end of the day, in summary of this book, I'd like to say, based on the way the author concludes the book, is that this is probably the reason it's so important to connect the mind with action is because, like the book is called The Real Me. The Real Me is a combination of your knowledge and your actions. There has to be a synthesis between the two. The Torah talks about krisos, kares, krisos, kares. If you do serious averas, you're kares. But in a certain sense, we're all born into a world where there is a krisos, where there is a separation between mind and body. It's very hard to connect mind and body. And if you think about it, if you look at an attractive woman, right? So if you just look at her face, she might have a pretty face. Look at her body. She might have a nice body. But it's so much better when you connect the body and the face. The face represents the mind. It's just someone with a nice face and a nice body, and you're able to get the full view. It's a nicer view. So the same thing when it comes to intellect and using your body, right? You should take what knowledge, whether it's in Torah or secular knowledge, and use it and make it applicable and combine your head. That's the real me. The real me is a combination where you're using your intellect in order to facilitate your body's enjoyment in the world. The way you enjoy the world is through the body, and it's facilitated and only really possible through the knowledge that you bring into your mind. So you got to have the knowledge, but you got to let it filter down into your body and have that connection between your head and your body, and that's the real I, right? I, if you look, the word it says me over here, but also being changed to I. And the I, a capital I, has a line underneath, a line on top, and a connecting piece going down. It represents your body. You got your head on top, you got your feet on the bottom, and you got the line shooting all the way down. There has to be a connection between your head and your feet, all the way down to your feet. And that's what I really have to say. If you want to be the real self, the real I, the real me, you have to value decision making, and you have to take it seriously, and you can't let it go. You have to make decisions and make the right choices. And the most important thing, as it says at the end of this book, in terms of making the right decisions, the only way you'll be able to keep making decisions if you constantly do tshuva, make sure you are right, and if you're not right, try to rectify what you did wrong. And doing wrong or doing right is through your body, through your actions. So the purpose of Cheshbon HaNefesh, taking a recounting of what you did during the day, is intellectually figuring out whether your body acted right or wrong. And that really is the real connection. Besides just the knowledge of the Torah and the knowledge of the secular world, the Cheshbon HaNefesh, where you're actually deciding, right, did I do the right thing or not, right? The decision, right, leads to the action, right? The Hachlata, the decision that leads to what I'm going to do forward. And that really connects. If you do that, make decision making for a long enough time to make sure you make the right decisions. Decision making is with your mind, and it filters down into your body, and you make sure your body aligns with your mind. Then you can connect. You can connect your mind, your head with the rest of your body. And then that's the real I, that's the real me, that's the real you. That's who you are, and you're a real person. And if you don't do that in your life, you'll always be, there's two types of people in this world. Most people are not successful in finding the real I. You have people, intellectuals, not just in Torah, big Rabbanim. You have big professors and big college universities that, they spend so much time thinking. Albert Einstein spent so much time thinking, these scientists and things like that. And then you have people that ignore, knowledge, ignore their mind. They just do whatever feels good to their body. And in both cases, there's a disconnect between the mind and the body. You have to connect the mind and the body. That's all I have to say. You want to be the real I, you got to be connected. You have to be connected. Like this is at the end, connected not just to the Torah, but connected mind and body, and then you'll be the real I. See you in the next book. The next book we're doing is called The Living Marriage. In Hebrew is Binyan Abayit. I believe it was a Hebrew book written and it was translated into English. It talks about marriage, but more particularly, it talks about intimacy in marriage. It's interesting that a Jewish book written by the Haskamas, the approbations to this book, were written by almost all the Gedolei Hador from the previous generation and present day generation, and there's so many Haskamas, approbations, that it's a great thing. It talks about pretty much the nitty gritty of intimacy in the bedroom, and bringing sources from the Torah, to what should be done, what should be valued, what shouldn't be valued, how to avoid pitfalls, how to be successful in it. It's not so explicit, but I am going to talk in greater detail of the things that it mentions in the book. But it's a segue for me to talk about this important concept. And I'll say it again, but when I became a chassan, when I became a groom, and I was about to get married, so my Rosh Hashiva gave a couple of lectures, private lectures to me. He gives to every groom before they get married about marriage. He had 7 points about marriage. It's actually documented in a book. It was written down by one of his students. Maybe after I finish this book, I'll do that book, which basically talk about marriage and having a good relationship, shalom bayis, having peace in your house. Besides that, getting along, respecting your wife's parents, things like that, treating your wife, being interested in her life, sharing with your wife, and, things that are talked about outside of the bedroom. But he admitted to me personally, and I guess he admitted to everybody, he said, what I'm telling you, these 7 points that he said, he categorized in the 7 main points, he said, that's not the main point of a marriage. That's only 5% of the success in the marriage is based on those 7 points. 95%, he quoted from Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, a big gadol of the previous generation, is ishus. Ishus is the bedroom, it's marital relations, and what you do in the bedroom. That's 95% responsible for the success of your marriage. So it is the most important thing when it comes to marriage. So that's why it deserves its own book, and it deserves a set of lectures that I'll be starting tomorrow. I'll be introducing the book, and I think it's something that is not just relevant for a Jewish audience or a frum audience, it's relevant for everybody, because as being married, I've been married for a little more than 5 years, that one line that my Rosh Hashiva told me, that 95% of the marriage is about the bedroom, has really stuck with me, and I've tried very hard to be successful in that aspect, and thank God I would do great marriage primarily because of that, because when it comes to other things, me and my wife have different perspectives on a lot of things, but that is something that is sacred in our marriage, and because of that, and because I've worked on it, my wife, I guess, worked on it a little bit, so we've had a great marriage despite other, differences of opinion that we have about other things. So it really is true. It really rings true. I would say maybe even more than 95%, maybe 98% is really based on your success in marriage is based on intimacy. And there's so much to talk about. Even though people think there's nothing to talk about, and people are scared to talk about this stuff. They're afraid. They're embarrassed to talk. Most people are embarrassed to talk about it. In Jewish culture and from Jewish culture, they'll tell you that it's too private. You're not supposed to talk about these things, and you're supposed to leave it. When you talk about these things, it sort of loses the kedusha for the union. Because even Judaism believes it's a mitzvah to be together with your wife and to have children. So these are positive things, but we don't want to talk about it because it's a violation of tznius. You're supposed to be a sanua person. You're supposed to be a closed-off person, a person who is modest. And modesty tells you not to talk about these things, but I don't think so. I disagree with that. It has to be talked about more, and to the fact that a really big rabbi, wrote this book. It was based on his teachings, and it has approbations of all the big gedolim, which is the leaders of the From Jewish circle. So it tells you that these lessons are really important. We'll talk more about it in the book, and it's a very important topic to talk about. And there's so much to talk about. People think there's not much to talk about because it hasn't been talked about yet, but there really is so much to talk about. I can't wait to start, and I hope that you will join me for this lecture series. It'll be invaluable, not just for the Jewish audience, but for any non-Jewish person who wants to really excel in their marriage and have a great marriage with their wife. Because most people, right, your wife is your life. If you don't have a good marriage with your wife, so it really depresses your life. You might think you don't want to do something for your wife, you don't want to have a good relationship, you want to get back at her, but at the end of the day, you have a bad, you're married to her. Divorce is usually the worst option because especially if you have kids. So you want to have a good marriage. If you want to have a good marriage, and again, 95% or more is dependent on the bedroom, stay tuned for the new lecture series, The Living Marriage, starting tomorrow. See you there. Bye.